All right, we are doing LG demonstration number 4, which is PT31 Section 1, the second one, which is from questions 7 through 13. This also you may be familiar with from PowerScore's killer LG list on their blog. And so the humorous, at least humorous to me, subtitle here refers to the idea that we have long since stopped listening to music on CDs primarily. So we may quickly reach a point, I don't think we're there yet, but it won't be too long before people kind of forget that that's what we used to do. But moving along. This is going to be a fairly long one, I think. So, as usual, we start with what I think makes this game more difficult. Honestly, it's a bit hard to say at the outset or in the setup phase why people struggle with this one. The game specifies that we're dealing with 10 things, new and used versions of 5 genres of music, and that we're really only doing one task with these 10 things, determining whether or not they're on sale. So, to me, those are all signs that this is just a rather simple in and out scenario, at least at the outset, right? I think PowerScore actually calls this one undefined on their killer LG listing on their blog, but I'm not sure if that's just an error, a typo on their part, or if they actually do consider undefined. I see no reason to call it that at this point. I think we just call it in and out like we always do. There is a chance that the rules will really throw a curveball at us, but we'll see about that. This would neither be the first nor the last time that I disagree with what the LSAT teaching establishment says regarding LG. So yeah, I'm not really. And besides, my whole thing is like labels and calling things by specific names. Those are not really all that important anyway. So we'll just kind of take that as it is. Either way, no matter what we consider this to be, I will be on the lookout for where I think the challenge for this game resides as I move along. It certainly doesn't seem to be at the very beginning on the surface level. I think I'm going to have to actually do this one again to remember what made it hard. Alright, so let's start with as the intro paragraph, as is our usual procedure. We are dealing with, it looks like, a music store that carries new and used versions of CDs, and the CDs are of different music genres, and of which I'm going to shorten to J, O, P, R, and S. The store is having a sale on some of these types of CDs. And so I'm going to stop here. I guess the word some, it's a potential rule zero, maybe. But I'm not sure if it's an implicit rule zero, that it will never be the case that all the CDs will be on sale. I mean, that's what the sentence implies here, because only some of them, not all of them, but some could include all as well. But honestly, the rules will probably prevent that all CDs are on sale. It'll probably prevent that from happening anyway. So I really think it's just a waste of time to think any further down this road. It's just as I was doing it, this was the first thought that popped into my mind. But the important thing, this is again the task that the paragraph tells us that we are supposed to do. We are going to select some of the CDs to be on sale, while others are not on sale. And to me, that makes this an in and out game, plain and simple. Nothing more to say about it. So, knowing that we have 10 entities that are basically two versions of a set of 5 things, um, and knowing that this is an in and out, this is going to be the extent of my diagram. We've got a set of used CDs, J, O, P, R, and S, and we've got a set of new ones with the identical letters, J, O, P, R, and S. I am going to be circling the ones on sale and crossing out the ones that aren't on sale, excuse me. And just as a note, as I was actually making the slide and animating it for this one, I'll get into it, but yeah, I don't actually for most of the rest of the presentation. I don't actually use a circle and cross out mechanic. I use a different one, but I'll specify what I mean. Although I've tended not to do this these days, but I'm just going to drop kind of a text dump on you guys here. Um, you'll see on the left side of the slide, this is what the rules looked like as I wrote them out on a piece of paper as I was doing this game myself. Rule number 1 tells us that used pop is always on sale. New opera is never on sale. Though those two are always the case. Rule number 2, used pop, if it's the case that used pop and new pop, both of them are on sale, then both forms of soul are on sale. And then, of course, contraposing that. And so you guys can read the rules for yourselves. They're not really that complex. I guess the only one to kind of pay attention to in terms of all of this is a lot of you guys, when you're doing contrapositives, forget to flip and or. But yeah, make sure you do that. So what I do want to make a note of is Rule 4. This one tells us that if we lack both forms of jazz being on sale, so if neither of them are on sale, that guarantees that new pop is on sale. So the contrapositive of that is kind of interesting. It tells us that if new pop is not on sale, then one of the two between used jazz and new jazz has to be on sale. And so the reason why I wanted to highlight this is twofold. One, this is the only rule that gives us a consequence of not having one of the CDs on sale. So the lack of new pop being on sale brings other things into the sale category, which is something unique amongst all the 5 rules. The other thing is the use of or here. And so just moving over to the upper right, IRL, we use the word or in the exclusive sense. If I ask you to choose A or B, I'm really asking you to choose just one out of the two. On this exam, though, unless otherwise specified, or is actually inclusive. So if the exam tells you A or B, it's actually telling you A or B or both. Both is one of the possibilities that is allowed by A or B. And so I'm just going to give an honorable mention to neither A nor B because the neither notation I know confuses some of you. And so neither is simply not A and not B. That's what it means. It's a negative sign in front of both of those things. And if I had to guess, this set of rules, and maybe in particular interpreting rule number 4 in the contrapositive, that may be where the initial difficulty is for most people. And you may not have detected it. You just may have misunderstood Rule 4 and moved on improperly if you struggled with this one on your own. But that's my guess so far, is that this is the first set of challenges. I don't really have any particular advice aside from to just mindlessly grind out these contrapositives without thinking too deeply. Just make sure to get the contrapositives right. But don't really feel the need to process anything beyond, am I doing the contrapositive correctly? That should be your only concern. Don't worry about any sort of deductive work or doing anything deeper than that. Just make sure that you know the 3 simple rules of contrapositives: reverse the elements, negate the elements, and then anytime you have and or, you switch them. Just make sure you're doing those 3 things, and you should be fine on this page to get the results that you need. And so I mentioned on the previous slide that even though here this circle and cross out notation is what I myself did on paper, just for my own sanity, I found that it was getting very, very onerous to try to animate all of these different elements with the circles and the crossouts because they're technically their own independent shapes here. I will be using a different notation, which will make itself very clear. But yeah. But like I said, if I were taking an exam myself, I definitely use this circle and cross out notation. So I would advise you guys to do the same. It's just only for the purposes of my sanity during video editing that I'm going to use a different format than what I've shown you here. Alright, so as usual at this point, after we have gone through the rules, our first step is to look for and most likely skip entirely the deduction stage. And that's what I have here. There's nothing that interests me. I'm sure that I can come up with something if I spend enough time, but the sheer effort in terms of time outlay, I'm just not going to bother. And again, this is all old news to those of you who have followed any of my content. Remember though, I am not the be all end all when it comes to this. If you personally do see a deduction immediately that would take you active effort to ignore, then try to spin it out. Just don't feel obligated to do a deduction ever under any circumstance. If you're not seeing them, that's fine. Don't bother. But if you do see them, that's also fine. Do it quickly and move on. Either way, the idea is to just not really spend any time and real effort on this stage. So now that brings us to the first question, number 7. This appears to be a rule checker. It's a rule checker, but each answer choice appears to be a very partial output. Not only does it only show us what is on sale, so we don't see what's not on sale, but these answers don't really reflect the base diagram that it's set up that had all 10 CDs out at once. So we can circle and cross out to get the big picture in one snapshot. These answers don't do that. It's just a very limited list of what is actually on sale. Despite these concerns, though, I'm going to start this as a standard rule checker because of the way it is being asked. And by standard rule checker, I mean I will eliminate as many answers as possible based purely on the rules with no further work. I'm not going to do any diagrams. I'm not going to check the things that are not on sale versus the answer choice, which only talks about what is on sale. I'm not going to do anything other than what we normally do for a rule checker. Start with rule 1, eliminate any violators, move on to rule 2, etc., etc. So the caveat is, because I did have these concerns, if just the rules as usual doesn't prove to be enough, that's when I'll step it up to looking at the rest of the diagram and trying to do things that the answer choices don't tell us. But only if the normal standard approach doesn't work, will I be resorting to that. Or, as you should be accustomed to hearing by now, I could be wrong. Maybe it'll prove to be expedient to consider the rest of the diagram immediately. We'll see. And so I'm kind of going through all this reflection because I feel like this is the best representation of my mental process at this time as I was doing this question. Because again, at the outset, I didn't really see why this game was so difficult, and I was looking for difficulty. I could kind of see it in the rules stage, but honestly, a lot of you guys are very, very good at the technical aspect of contrapositives, so really, other than rule 4, maybe, you really shouldn't have had too many problems contraposing it. And if you do, of course, let me know, and I can kind of send you an email or give you a free consultation on how to do contrapositives and some of the ins and outs of formal logic. But largely, that was still me stretching. I still don't know what exactly makes this one of the hardest of all time, just by what I've done so far. So I'm just paranoid, even at the very safe number 1 rule checker question, that I could be missing something. So yeah, that's why I'm doing all this back and forth. But yeah, well, let's do notes out. So this is the new notation. I will highlight in green things that are on sale and use a strikeout to indicate things that are not on sale. And so we're going to start with rule number 1, which in this new format shows you that used pop is on sale, so therefore it's in green, and new opera is not on sale, and this is in all times and all places. So it has a strike through on it. Does this get rid of anything? No, unfortunately not, which is a little bit concerning. Usually I like to have at least 1 eliminate from each rule, but we do have 5 rules, so maybe we'll luck out. Rule number 2. This gets rid of D. We do have both forms of pop on sale, but only one of the S's on sale. And what rule 2 tells us is that we need, if we have both P's on sale, we do need both of the S's out there. Rule 3. If used jazz is on sale, then new jazz is... If used jazz and new jazz, both forms of jazz are on sale, then both forms of rap are not on sale. And this eliminates A. We do have both J's on sale, and one of the R's is on sale too. No can do. We're not allowed to do that. Rule 4. If both forms of jazz are not on sale, then new pop is on sale. This eliminates C. C has neither one of the J's that are on sale, which would mean that we should see a new pop in the list, but we don't. And finally, getting to rule 5, if either form of rap, used or new, is on sale, then that means both forms of soul are not on sale. And that gets rid of B. We have used rap, which means that we shouldn't see any soul, but we do have new soul on sale. No can do. So I'm just going to select B, not even going to check it, true to the style of rule checker questions. It turns out we didn't actually need to consider any of my other paranoid musings other than what the rules say on their face. No deeper probing necessary. So yeah, none of the other concerns that I had about this question in terms of it being a partial output mattered. The same old rule checker approach worked again. Big surprise, right? Moving on to number 8. Alright, so if it is the case that new soul is not on sale, what else must be true on the basis of this? So this is not an open-ended must-be-true question, but instead gives us a piece of information to plug into the diagram, so we will do precisely that. So here is our diagram, and I have done precisely that. In the new CD line, I have crossed out new soul, because that's what our question told us to do. So are there any mandatory consequences of new soul being out? And I guess rule 2 is where we would naturally start. If we're crossing out any of the souls, we are also crossing out at least one of the P's. We have to do this. This is a mandatory consequence. Although, despite the enthusiasm with which we must do that, I think this is also the end of the line in terms of any mandatory consequences. Because looking at it further, losing one of the P's might matter when it comes to Rule 4, but only if we happen to cross out new pop, so there doesn't really seem to be any strictly mandated outcome. But since the question asks us to find something that must be true, and we literally just found something that must be true, we might as well stop here to check for our answers. And so again, to review, the only thing we knew is the thing that for sure is we are crossing out at least one of the P's, and mercifully E actually tells us that exact thing. it tells us that at least one of the P's is gone, and that's precisely what we found, so we can stop the work there. Moving on to number 9. If both forms of jazz are on sale, what is the minimum number of new CDs that are on sale? And so I capitalized new here because the very first time I did this question, for the purposes of making this video, I actually missed the word new and was looking at the total number of new CDs on sale. And fortunately, none of the answers worked if under that regime, so I was able to catch my mistake very quickly. But yeah, in case you missed that, I just wanted to emphasize it. So question number 9 is asking us, on the basis of both jazzes being on sale, what is the minimum number of new CDs that are on sale? So obviously it's at least one, since the question itself tells us that new jazz is on sale. But I think the best way to move forward from here is to see again if the JU, JN, new jazz, used jazz, that combination forcefully adds anything to the sale list and follow a chain of consequences if any appear. And so when I wrote this, it felt like something worth saying, but now it just feels redundant and obvious. My bad, guys. But yeah, we're just going to plug it in and see what happens. So rule number 3 is the most direct place to start. This tells us that if we have both used and new jazz on sale, then neither form of rap is on sale. There seems to be no further consequence of this particular path. If we're missing both raps, there's nothing mandatory. It makes us eligible to add in soul if we want to, but we're looking for a minimum, so yeah, that's it. So currently, the mandatory new CD count still remains at 1 with new jazz. Rule 3 hasn't added anything to it. So I'm just going to loop back up to the top of the rules because I don't think I don't really see any other logical place to start. My eye isn't drawn anywhere. So starting up there, we are told that new opera is always out and used pop is always in. There doesn't appear to be any further mandatory consequence of adding these two pieces of data. So again, our current mandatory new CD count remains at 1. Now, if we just kind of take all the information that Rule 1, Rule 3, and the question stem gave us, this is what we have. Both forms of jazz are on sale, used pop is on sale, new opera is not on sale, and both forms of rap are not on sale. Now, just looking at all of this together, does this whole set have any further consequence with any rule? And the answer is no. I don't really, we've been pretty systematic. I don't really see anything. So I do believe that it's enough to say that 1 is the mandatory minimum count for new CDs. The rules tell us everything, and none of the information that we have, no matter how I cut it, forces any other new CD to go on sale. And so here's really where the rubber meets the road in terms of me teaching you guys anything valuable. You could insert all the info we have, this both forms of jazz, according to the question stem. Your used pop is on sale and new opera is not, according to rule number 1, and then rule number 3, which tells us used rap and new rap are not on sale. You could put that into the 10 entity diagram that we have and confirm that 1 is the minimum number by trying to fill the rest of it out. But your procedure would be exactly the same as what I did here. See if the rules tell you anything further based on this set of information. And a big hint, the outcome is the same. So what I'm trying to get at here is that through the sort of unmagic of pre-recording stuff and putting it up here, I do have to necessarily rely pretty heavily on diagramming things just to show you guys what I'm doing and what I'm thinking. But really, when it comes down to it, I don't actually diagram nearly as much as these slides would imply that I do in terms of making a full diagram. I'm writing a lot of partial things to check rules, but I'm not really wedded to making full diagrams each and every time that I feel it might add anything to the situation. And I think this is a great example of a question like that, where I'm just going by the rules, and I trust that if I can't find anything based on the rules as written, that's all there is to do it. I think the paranoia that you and frankly myself, as I was still a student, have about a situation like this. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe if I put it this way, put it that way. Not really. And so I went through a couple extra steps here that I normally don't, just to kind of prove that point. We knew that by the time I checked rule number 3 and rule number 1 that was it. There was no further consequence. No other rules really had any consequence of both forms of jazz being on sale. Nothing happened. None of the rules were really activated other than what we talked about. And that to me was enough to say that there is nothing else added. Because even if you put all the information that we had back into a diagram to just check it out visually, what are you going to do? You have to look at the rules. And it's gonna be the same. There's not anything new there. And so this is just to emphasize the completeness of the set of rules, as basically the arbiter of what is and isn't in a game. The rules are everything, long story short. So based on this, because we have determined one way or the other that one is in fact the mandatory minimum of new CDs that have to be on sale, we are going to select A here and moving on to 10. 10 ends in cannot be true, but cannot be true, of course, is the same thing as must be false for the purposes of the table of power. So the procedure, and this being a open-ended question, ideally, a game will have generated enough boards at this point for us to make several easy eliminations. Unfortunately, I don't think questions 7 through 9 really gave us much we can use here. Again, question 7 was a rule checker, but the output that it offered was only a partial version of the picture, so it's not really that complete. We are missing a lot of things. 8, of course, didn't really give us much of anything. Neither did 9. Maybe question 9 if we really wanted to put all those things into the diagram, but I'm not getting my hopes up on it. So what I would do, and what I actually did, is just start with A and move down the list according to the table of power. If I could actually pull off what A says, then I eliminate A, since it does not have to be false. Move down the list until I hit one that I can't get to work. Again, this is nothing new to any of you who've been following my stuff. I just included this in case somebody who hasn't been exposed to the table of power doesn't really know what I'm talking about. This is the procedure that I'm using to test answer choices systematically. In a must be false question, the only thing you have to do is test the answer choice exactly as it is. Just plug it into the diagram, and if you can find some way to get it to work, it doesn't matter how. If you can get it to work, then it's not the answer you're looking for. I'm just going to keep going until you find one that doesn't work. So that brings us to answer A. Answer A suggests that it must be false that we are missing both forms of opera and both forms of rap from the sale list. So first things first is plug in that information right into the diagram. So I'll throw in JOPRS, and then cross off both the O's, cross off both the R's. And now to flesh out the rest of the diagram to see where this ends up. Rule number 1 tells us that used pop is on sale and new opera is not on sale. And so of course we've already crossed out new opera, so that doesn't change anything. But we do need to add in the idea that used pop is on sale. So we do precisely that. And this is where our diagram is at this point. And I'm not sure that we need to do anything else based on any of the rules. Again, there's no rule that governs the presence or absence of used opera. We know that new opera is gone no matter what. We've already done that with rule number 1. The only other mandatory outcome is used pop being on sale again. We did that through rule number 1. And both raps being missing doesn't mandate any certain outcome. Again, it makes us eligible, according to some of the later rules, to use soul, or to put soul on sale, excuse me, but it doesn't mean that we have to take soul, right? It just means that we can if we want to. So I'm not sure we need to do anything else. So like I said, losing both O's, no consequence. Losing both R's, no consequence. Adding used pop further has no consequence. We'd have to know something about new pop to trigger any rules regarding the pops, but we don't need to do anything with new pop. So yeah, I think with all that being said, we can just eliminate A. It seems like if we wanted to, we can make a whole range of successful diagrams with all these things crossed out. Pushing on to B now. B's imagined scenario is that must it be false that we are missing both forms of J and both forms of O. And so in terms of the diagram, this is what we have. I'm just going to start folding in rule number 1 just because it would be literally the first thing I have to write on every single slide, so may as well just throw it in there. But yeah, we have both forms of J are out according to the question stem, both forms of O are out according to the question stem, and rule number 1 would simply add used P to the mix, and we've already crossed out new O thanks to the answer choice, so we don't really need to add anything. But this is our diagram, our initial diagram. So looking for mandatory consequences, my eye is drawn to rule 4, which matches this triggering condition is matched by the question stem. When you're missing both J's, that means that new pop does have to be on sale. So we do precisely that. We add that right into our diagram. Rule number 2. Now, this is triggered by the fact that we have now have highlighted both forms of P. So used P and new P If we use both of those, that means that we also have to use both used S and new S according to rule number 2. So I add that to the diagram. And of course, it looks like this, nothing further to say. Rule number 5, again, is now further triggered by the fact that we are using both forms of S. Having both of these means that, having both S's means that we cannot have either of the R's, according to Rule 5. Again, because having even just one of the R's would disqualify us from using any S's, and the fact that we have both of them pretty much solidly guarantees. Even just one S would guarantee that we're not using any of the R's, but having both S's is just like the only way to make that more extreme. So this is what our diagram looks like, and you'll notice that we're done. We filled in a completed diagram. I'm just going to do a quick check of this against the rules, even though it's not necessary at all because I just went through literally all the rules. But yeah, rule number 1, used P is in, new O is out. Yep, checks out. Rule number 2, having both P's highlighted means that we have both S's highlighted. Yep, did that. Rule number 5, having both S's highlighted, or even just one of the S's really, guarantees that we have to cross out both of the R's, and we've done that too. So yeah, it checks out. So we eliminate B. Not only is it possible, it can only play out one way. So this is finally, I think, the first time that this game so far has just kind of given us a completed diagram that we can't use. So this is a good thing. Even though it wasn't the answer, it gave us some we got some mileage out of it. Interestingly, speaking of mileage, we can also eliminate E on the basis of our work here, since we have both J's and both R's gone in this situation, which is what E suggests. And so I looked ahead to the other answer choices. So this is only B. I looked at C, D, and E real quick on instinct, just because we had a complete diagram. And the way it is here, you can kind of see that things kind of line up, right? Where we either have both of something or we're missing both of something. And so that seemed to be what our answer choices were trying to kind of say. And so I was like, oh, is there any other information that we can piggyback off of the work that we did for B? And lo and behold, it allows us to eliminate E again, because since in the work that we did here, we have both J's gone and both R's gone, and it worked out, E is clearly not what we're looking for. So moving on to C. C, which suggests we are missing both O's and both S's, and we're asking, must that be false? Well, to do that, again, as we always have, we're going to have a diagram that incorporates baseline rule number 1, as well as the information from answer choice C here. So rule number 1, of course, states, as always, that used P is in and new O is out. And then to that, we add the information from C, which is that both O's are gone and both S's are gone. All right, so Rule 2, interestingly, is, I would say, the first mandatory consequence that we have. So Rule 2 says that even if we're missing one of the S's, we happen to be missing both here, but even if we're missing one of them, the consequence of that is that at least one of the P's is out. But since Rule 1 mandates that used P is always in anyway, that means in this case, in order to satisfy Rule number 2, we have to ensure that new P is out. Because again, just as the diagram as it was starting, we had used P in there, and we didn't know the disposition of new P. Rule 2 states that we actually do know the disposition of new P, which is that it's out. Because we are missing at least one of the S's, we've got to be missing at least one of the P's. It can't be used P, because Rule 1 tells us that's always in there anyway. So in this case, that tells us that we have to lose new P. So this is what our diagram looks like. The only change between the first one and this one is that we, of course, now have crossed out used P, or new P, from the list. Moving on to Rule 4, which I think is the next mandatory consequence. Losing new P in turn means that at least one of the J's is out, because Rule 4 tells us that if neither type of J is on sale, then new P is. The contrapositive is that if new P is not on sale, then one of the J's at least is on sale. So the unfortunate thing is, I don't know if there's a smart way to incorporate this into the diagram, because it's optional. We don't know which one of the J's is going to be in. So yeah, we have to we just have to make do with the information. And that is the end of the line. I don't see any more mandatory consequences. Losing at least one of the J's, or in this case, actually more accurately, having at least one of the J's doesn't seem to do anything else. So with what we have left, I guess we can just pick one of the J's. It doesn't seem to matter which one. one or both of the R's and finish it out that way. And so I just want to make a note before actually finishing out the diagram. I am actually finishing this one out, unlike what I did with A, because the diagram seems close enough to completion that it might be worth it. So I'm just going to pick the first J, lowest hanging fruit. That's my methodology, right? The first J that I can in the diagram, which is used J, and pick the first R, used R as well. I'm going to avoid having both R's in this sample diagram. Not that I need to do so, but I'm just less comfortable having more R's, since having more R's seems to carry more risk regarding the other genres. It seems like R has poor interactions with the J's and the S's, I believe. Yeah, so then I'm looking at Rule 3 and Rule 5. So yeah, I just want to avoid picking both R's because that seems to be fairly limiting. So this is what my sample completed diagram looks like. We've picked the top row, we've picked used J, used P, and used R. We've crossed out used O and S, and we've crossed out everything new in this particular sample diagram. So checking this against the entire list of rules, it checks out. So again, rule number 1 we incorporated from the get-go. Used P is in, new O is out, so that checks out. Rule 2, we are also that was one of the things the few things that we explicitly did here. It mandates that since if we have both types of P on sale, then all sold is, but we don't have both types of P on sale, so that's okay. That rule isn't triggered. And then the contrapositive, of course, is what we actually dealt with, and that worked out too. Rule 3, if both J's are on sale, then no wrap is. And again, this is why I was trying to avoid using both J's, because I didn't want to really trigger this rule. And we only have one of the J's, so it doesn't really matter. And then we have the contrapositive isn't triggered either, because well, it is technically, if one of the wraps is on sale, then it's not the case that both types of jazz are on sale, and we've also done that too. So yeah, I was getting a little ahead of myself there. We did need to check the contrapositive, but we're still safe there too when it comes to Rule 3. All right, moving on to Rule 4. If neither type of J is on sale, then new pop is. That doesn't matter, because we haven't triggered the condition on the front end of Rule 4, nor have we triggered the condition for the contrapositive Rule 4. So that checks out. And Rule 5, either type of wrap is on sale and no solos. This one also checks out. We do have one R highlighted, and both of the S's are gone. So that's good. So yeah, we get to eliminate C. We have made a complete diagram, and we technically didn't have to, but just to be safe, we made a complete diagram, and it checks out, so we eliminate C. Pushing onwards to D. At this point, because we've eliminated everything else, if I were pressed for time, I'd feel relatively comfortable just picking D and being done with it. I have been pretty thorough about each answer so far. However, if I did have the time to do so, I'd definitely check this out, given the relatively work-intensive difficulty of this game so far. So just checking D real quick, which alleges that it must be false, that we're missing both J's and we're missing both S's. So again, first thing we do is we incorporate Rule 1 and the answer choice into our diagram. So Rule 1, again, used P is highlighted, and new O is excluded, it's crossed out. And then to that we add D's information, which gets rid of both of the J's and both of the S's. Mandatory consequences. Rule 4 seems to be the first one. If both J's are gone, that means at least we have new P in the mix here. So we add that to our diagram, which is just basically the same thing as we had above, just that now we've highlighted new P as well. Ooh, but this gives us a problem. Rule 2. Having both P's means that we have both S's, but that contradicts what answer choice D has, which is that we are missing both J's and both S's. So frankly, right now, just this conflict alone, it's enough to select D, but in case you want a more explicit reasoning, D consists of two elements. It consists of a condition of lose both J's and lose both S's. However, the first condition, the first element, lose both J's, results in another situation called have both P's. But that have both P's condition, in turn, conflicts with the original lose both S's element of D. So, in other words, the first element of D, lose both J's, results in something that contradicts the second element of D, which is lose both S's. We can't have both of those things true at the same time. So D must therefore be false. So just a strategy note here about what we did for question 10. Checking the correct answer D should have felt a bit anticlimactic, maybe. It resulted in a very obvious skin-deep self-contradiction for a must-be-false question. In other words, we didn't have to dig deep at all to find it. It really felt like a ton less work than some of the other answers where we did a lot of work only to find that it wasn't the one that we were looking for. So this leads to two possible perspectives on this issue. The first, and the one which I kind of suggest for the most part, is only check for skin deep self contradictions, very much like we did for A, on this sort of question. The idea here is that if you reach that no further consequences point, and nothing up to that point led to a D-esque, skin deep, very obvious contradiction, then just move on. Just keep moving until you do find that very shallow contradiction like we did in D. And again, this will just simply get you to D faster, and since D was so easy to analyze, ideally just getting to D faster means you actually answer the entire question faster. So really this applies to, and I'll get to in a second, this applies to a choice that we had at several junctures to either complete diagrams or not. So the second possible perspective, so again, to recap, the first possible perspective is just to only look as far as that point of no further consequences. Even if your diagram isn't completely done at that point, just keep moving until you find an answer that you're looking for. The other thing is what we ended up doing, the second perspective, which was a bit of a mix of our approaches here. I didn't spin out A any further than I had to. I was ready as always to revisit it if necessary, but I didn't invest any more effort once I hit that no further consequences point relatively early on. So our work for answer choice A looks like approach number one. We were just looking according to the rules, and we reached the point of no further consequences, and it didn't have that sort of skin deep, obvious contradiction like D did. It didn't have that, so I just stopped working on A, even though the diagram for A wasn't completely done. B is slightly different, but it doesn't really count here, but I think it's worth noting. B just naturally led to a full-on diagram, so we really didn't have a choice, if you want to look at it that way, between stopping at a certain point and moving on. Because the situation it suggested really only had one possible valid outcome. I considered it worth the effort because honestly, it didn't take that much effort. It led down a singular path. It had to turn out that way. I didn't have to really consider much. It was just one consequence chained into another, and then all of a sudden we found that we were done. And as a bonus, it eliminated E from the running. And as even a further bonus, it did yield a completed diagram, which is something this game has been particularly ungenerous with. The hope is that having more completed diagrams under your belt will simply lead to faster eliminations on the remaining 3 questions. It's never a guarantee, it never is, but having more, generally speaking, is going to, according to probability, just be better for us in the long term. And I decided, again, just to finish it out because I detected that we were going to be pretty close to done, and then it had the bonus of maybe providing completed work for future questions. And the being able to eliminate E at the same time was just a nice unforeseen bonus, really. Now C, answer choice C is really the first true opportunity we had to choose between keep it skin deep like A or spin it out like B. I could easily have just not finished the diagram, but since it was marginally closer to completion, I thought I'd just finish it out. And again, this is very similar to my reasoning with B, is that the hope is that more completed diagrams could help with eliminations later down the road. Never a guarantee, but it may help. But frankly, it is of questionable value, right? Like I said, it's only a probabilistic thing. The hardest games, very often, one of the ways they punish you is by not allowing you to capitalize on that previously completed work. So if you think it would take you too much time and effort to settle on a fully completed diagram from a choice like answer choice C, I say give it the A treatment. Leave it unfinished and just keep moving, and then hopefully you'll land on D, right? Doing so, again, would have led you to D faster, which, again, was very easy to eliminate as the must-be-false option. So yeah, really, this is just a wordy way of noting that I did have a different approach between answer choice A and answer choice C. I didn't finish out A, and that was fine. And I did finish out C, and it was entirely optional. And either way, it was fine. It's just that it depends on what you feel like you need more. If you are really worried about time, then you should have given answer choice C the same treatment as A. Once you hit that point of no further consequences, it really wasn't necessary to spin it out further. But for me, just because I am used to and I like having more completed diagrams, and I felt like since I was doing this for the video, I had all the time in the world, right? But I may not have made the choice that I did for answer choice C if I was doing this real time for myself, and it was just, I just felt like it was too much work. It would have been just as fine, and from a timing perspective, would have been great. I would have just hit D a lot faster without doing any more cognitive work, and I would have been able to answer it. So yeah, just a note there. So pushing forward into 11. 11 is a must be true except. So and specifically it is asking us if we are missing both types of J's, if neither of them are on sale, it must be true except. So this is a prime candidate for using some of the previous work, so hopefully it would be nice if that came into play. I'm not sure if it will though. So the one answer we're looking for is a situation where we can get away with not doing whatever that answer choice says in the provided missing both J's condition. So from the question that we just did, answer choice B is the first you're missing both J's scenario I can think of, where we have a completed diagram. If any of these answers suggest something that we didn't have to do in B, then that's what we're going to pick here. So again, if any of the answers in 11 asks us to do something that we didn't have to do in B, then that's our answer. And lucky us, A right away alleges that used O must be selected, and that must be the case. Luckily for us, answer choice B from question 10 showed us that it's very possible to have both J's missing and have that result in a diagram that doesn't include either of the O's. So since it doesn't have to be true that missing both J's results in including used O, we get to select A and we're done. I can demonstrate, and if there's enough requests through email, I guess I'll edit this video, but if you want it, you can email me. I can demonstrate how to eliminate B through E, but I really don't think that's what you should do here. And like I said, I'll add this if there's enough requests, but it's just going to look very much like what we did for question number 10. I'm not sure how much value is going to be added for you guys here. So pushing into number 12. 12 is asking us if new S is the only new CD on sale, what must be false? And again, just like 11, ideally some of our previous work that matches the condition given by question 12 STEM, namely, new Soul is the only new one on sale. That previous work can help guide us here. We are eliminating any answers that might be able to work because we are going to select the only one that can never ever work. So anything that is possible, we're eliminating. Anything that is impossible, we're selecting. Sadly though, we don't seem to have any diagrams on hand where new Soul is the only new one on sale, where that condition is true. So that leaves us with another two approaches situation, which is marginally different than the strategy note number 1 situation. The first approach that I have here is that I could just plug in the condition given by the question and see if there are any mandatory consequences based on just the question stem alone that lead us to a this can never work outcome without bothering to finish out the diagram and plug in answer choices if I don't feel the need to. So again, this boils down to if you just plug in the condition given by 12, just plugging in that information and checking mandatory consequences without even looking at an answer choice, is that enough to tell us what must be false? If that's the case, then and we get an answer, then we're done. We don't even need to try answer choices. The second approach is necessitated by if we plug in the condition and we can't find any mandatory consequences that give us the outcome that we want, which is an answer choice that must be false, then we will have to plug in answer choices. And at that point, as we are doing answer choices, that's where strategy note number 1 is, where how far do we take this answer choice? Do we have to finish out the diagram, or can we just move on without doing it? So I just wanted to highlight this because I wanted to do 11 and 12 slightly differently, just to show you that there are a couple different ways to do things. And so again, this is distinct from strategy note number 1, which is specifically about how far to take each answer choice when you're in the realm of doing answer choices, while strategy note number 2 is about whether or not we should start plugging in answer choices at all. And in case you guys are wondering, how important is this to note that there are 2 possible strategies and two approaches within each strategy, so that's 4 different things. None of that's really important. I'm just trying to be more explicit about my thinking and why question 12 looks a little different from question 11 in terms of how I'm doing it. You could do both of them the same, and it really wouldn't. I don't think it would make a marked difference. Doing what works for you is what helps. I'm just trying to change things up and be explicit about it and describe what it is that I'm doing, and that's what results in all this strategy notes and approaches and text. But really, that's all secondary to just the basic principles of the question is asking you for this, and either it gives you a little bit of information to work with or it doesn't. And so what do you do? The table of power, again, will always solve everything anyway. and everything else is just how many different other kinds of shortcuts that you've seen before. Because none of this stuff is brand new. If you've seen my videos, especially, you've seen me do all this stuff before, one way or the other, and I haven't decided to be explicit about it until now. Just for instructive purposes, I'm doing it here. But really, this is why I call myself a minimalist, because if I were to try to teach you this is just more information that you don't really need. You don't really need this. I'm just, again, trying to describe what my process is here. So, the first approach is what I'm going to start with because it's always less work intensive. We're just going to plug in the stuff from the stem and see if that yields this can never happen information. So incorporating this into our diagram, we get this. Again, this baseline diagram already includes the information from Rule 1, which is that used P is in, new O is out. And to that we add the information from the stem of 12, which is that new S is the only one on sale. So we highlight new S and cross out everything else in the new category. So this is what our starting diagram looks like. Now, is this enough to get us to a choice? Let's see. The first mandatory consequence I see is rule number 5. If either type of wrap is on sale, then no sole is. But we do happen to see that there is some sole on sale at least. So that means that neither type of wrap can be on sale. So again, having any of the R's disqualifies us from having any of the S's. So since we have new S, that means both R's have to be gone. So this is what our diagram looks like. All that it is the first diagram, just that now we have also crossed out used R. The next consequence, new P is gone, and that means according to Rule 4, which is that if neither type of jazz is on sale, the new pop is, that means at least one of the J's is on sale. Since we know it can't be new jazz because our question told us that new soul is the only one on sale, the one that we have to pick is used jazz here. So again, same diagram as the one just above it, except we have just highlighted new or used jazz, to reflect the working of Rule 4. And Rule 4, whenever I teach this, I don't teach this game often, but I have fairly recently and fairly regularly over the past, I would say, 5-6 years. Even though I can never remember all the ins and outs of it each time I do it. Rule 4, I think I recall as something that gives people a fair amount of difficulty because of the neither mechanic, and it's kind of unique. So again, what it says is neither type of jazz is on sale, the new pop is on sale. The contrapositive is if new pop is not on sale, then it cannot be true, it is not the case that neither type of jazz is on sale. And you can translate it cannot be the case that neither type of jazz is on sale, that's a double negative, into one of the types of jazz, at least, is on sale. Because it cannot be the case that we're missing both. We've got to have at least one of them. And that's what leads us to this particular piece of information. I'm not going to bother, just because that's going to be a lot of text, writing that out, but if that still confuses you, feel free to leave a comment, let me know, and I will be happy to take you through it a little bit more slowly, a little bit more deliberately. But that's what Rule 4 means. And that finally appears to be the end of the line for mandatory consequences. There are 0 restrictions on the use of used opera, and we're free to take used soul since both R's are out, and that we don't have that problem restricting the use of soul. And we can also easily decide not to take used soul. So it's the same as we're used. We're free to take it or not, since nothing is forcing us to do one thing or the other. So we know 2 things for sure. We must eliminate used rap, and we must select used jazz on top of what the question stem told us. So any answer that denies either of those things must be false. That's where I'm going to start. And so nice. A directly contravenes the we must use or we must select used J, that bit. So we get to select A and we're done with it. So finally we are on the last one, number 13, which tells us that if 4 out of the 5 used CDs are the only ones on sale, what could be true? So I'm going to have the same breakdown of approaches as I did for number 12. Hopefully approach 1 will be enough like last time, but if it isn't, we will have to plug in some answer choices. So again, incorporating question 13's condition into our baseline plus rule 1 diagram yields this. We have used P selected, and then we have crossed out all the new ones because that's what question 13 is suggesting. is telling us is the situation we're dealing with. 4 out of the 5 used CDs are the only ones on sale, so that means none of the new CDs could possibly be on sale. Alright, moving into mandatory consequences. Rule 4 raises its head again. If we are missing new P, then that means at least one of the J's has to be chosen. Because again, the rule as it's written, if both of the J's are out, new P would have to be chosen. But since new P is not chosen, that means at least one of the J's is in. And of course, new P is certainly not chosen because none of the new ones are on sale, thanks to the question stem. So what that yields is that we have to select use J. So again, the question stem tells us that we can't select anything new. JOPRS, none of that new stuff is possible. Rule 4, as we just saw, told us that because new P is out, at least one of the J's has to be chosen. The only option that we had was use J, because new J we can't do according to the question. So that's why our diagram looks like this. And I think we have reached the end of the line for mandatory consequences again. There's no restrictions on used O. If we use used R, if we highlight used R, all we have to do is cross out used S and select used O to reach our 4 used CDs on sale. So that doesn't. So I'm not sure that we have to do anything with used R. If we highlight used S, then all we have to do is cross out used R according to I believe it's rule 5. Maybe it's rule 5. Then again, we have to pick up used O because that is again what we're going to need to reach our count of 4 used CDs on sale. But interestingly, even though I thought that was the end of the line, turns out by doing a little bit more stuff, I found that there is something. If we want to reach our count of 4 used CDs on sale, which is what question 13 demands, we need to have used O in there. Since used R and used S can't be used at the same time, we can only have one of the two, according to Rule 5. So to pad out our count, we need to have used O in there. So this is what our diagram looks like. We have to pick these 3, JOP in the used line, and the used row, excuse me. And we have to pick one of R or S. So does that actually help us answer the question? So now that we have this diagram, and all we have left is to choose between used R, used S to get our 4th used sale, as the question demands. So any answer that contradicts what we've discovered, we must use used J and used O, and can have only one of used R, used S, must be eliminated because it just can't be true, and we're looking for something that could be true. Also, conversely and more straightforwardly, if we do find an answer that fits within the above framework that we have, that obviously could be true, and it is the answer that we're looking for. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip down to C. It fits what we're looking for. It suggests that it's possible to not put used R on sale, which means we would have to use used S, and that's entirely possible within the framework that we discovered, so we get to select C, which is that used R is not on sale. Because again, if we don't have used R on sale, all we need to do is just pick used S, and then we could finish out the diagram that way, and it works. And so now the takeaways. And I'm already regretting kind of having gone through strategy note 1 and 2, but again, I'm just trying it out to see if this information helps you at all. So give me feedback if you feel like it's just more overcomplication and further departure from my true minimalism style. But yeah, just because I included it, I'll talk about it here. When you have the option of completing a diagram for an answer choice versus moving on faster, and this is all when you've already reached the point where you're plugging in answer choices. When you have the choice between finishing out a diagram or not, approach number 1 is to only work towards the point of no further consequence. And once you've reached that and it hasn't given you, if the answer choice is eliminated or doesn't give you what you're looking for, just keep moving down the answer choices until you reach the correct one where you do run into the fatal contradiction or whatever makes it work well. When that property reveals itself with relatively superficial effort. So again, just think back to question 10, answer choice D. We were looking for a must be false answer, and D was extremely easy to prove that it had to be false. It had 2 elements. We were missing both J's and I believe both S's, and that just couldn't work out. So approach number 2, though, doesn't get you to the answer choice that much faster. Even if you reach the point of no further consequence on an answer choice, sometimes it pays off to complete the diagram anyways. Like I said, in some situations like question 10 answer choice B, you don't even get the choice to stop. The initial condition set up by the answer choice spins out only one way and yields a complete diagram. So what is my recommendation between approach 1 and approach 2? Both are very handy approaches, and I wouldn't discourage you from using either one if you find one of the two is just consistently better for you. And you would do well, though, overall, to move flexibly between the two, again, based on your LG experience in general and your feeling of each game in particular. This is a very situational thing. I'm not just being kind of lawyerly here and saying, may or may not. That's really true. Even if you find that, approach 1 just worked beautifully for you on the first game in a section, maybe you're crashing and burning in flames with it in the third game in this section. And maybe you find that, okay, maybe I should actually just complete some diagrams because this is a lot of work, and having more diagrams is just the way to go for future questions on this one. It's not only based on what tends to work for you. You really do have to build up your own base of experience. You have to find out that, okay, it works most of the time, but you need to be able to recognize when a situation might call for more detailed work. And I unfortunately don't have a very clear way of telling you, okay, always do this here and always do that there. I can't really recommend one or the other based on a set of conditions. And I just want to make a personal note. I personally do lean towards approach 2 just for the sake of having some complete diagrams on hand when the game has been stingy with providing them. So again, just for raw speed and laziness, I do lean on approach 1 more often, which is why I noted that I generally recommend that in the strategy note when I had it earlier in the presentation. But I do also lean towards approach 2 situationally, again, when I feel like a game has been very, very ungenerous with providing completed diagrams. I like to have several completed diagrams, at least by about the halfway point at any given game, just so that I can lean on that previous work and make some faster eliminations. So this whole slide basically is just telling you there are multiple approaches, yes, and I have specified both of them for your convenience. But it's one of those things where I can't really give you a right answer, and for me to sit here and pretend like there is a right answer is to ignore the fact that not only is every person different, every game is arguably different according to which approach is better. I'm providing this just because it's an explanation of what it is that's actually going on in my head, but it's not something that you really need to commit to memory. It's just something that you can. It's just another one of the many instances where there's several ways to do it. Pick your poison, to do what you like. Strategy note number 2 is slightly different again. This is not really about testing answer choices, but prior to that, when a question stem gives you information, and you plug in what it tells you and it yields a consequence, approach number 1 is immediately search for low-hanging fruit, even without finishing a diagram completely based on the information given to you from a question stem and its mandatory consequences. If you know that you must exclude A but include B, search for an answer choice right away that respects what you discovered, even if you haven't finished the diagram. Even if the information given to you from the question stem doesn't fully determine the picture, which most of the time it won't. Even when that's the case, just go immediately without trying to finish out the diagram. Approach number 2, take the insights that you gained as described in approach 1 above, but withhold judgment. Instead, go answer by answer, plugging them in to see if they conform to what the question demands. My recommendation here is much more clear. When you are doing a question and you feel like the question stem gives you a piece of information that is pretty promising, that may by itself yield a lot of mandatory consequences, always go for approach 1. Approach 2 naturally happens only when approach 1 fails. Approach 1 traditionally pays off very reliably. So you saw how it worked in questions number 12 and 13, right? 12 and 13 both gave us a piece of information that when we plugged it in, we found out some things that had to happen based on that. That's why they give you that information, right? If there were no consequences, they wouldn't ask you a question about it, generally speaking. I believe there are a few exceptions, but those are few and far between. Most of the time, the vast majority of the time, they're going to be like 12 and 13. Plugging in the info from the question stem leads to a bunch of things. And so usually, as you saw with 12 and 13, just plugging in that bunch of things is enough. You can just take the consequences of the plugin of the question stem and then pick an answer based on that without testing each individual answer. So yeah, I'd be remiss not to recommend approach one because that's generally how these things work out. When a question stem gives you information and then tacks on cannot be true or could be true or something at the end, very often you can just plug in the information from the stem, see what results as a mandatory consequence, and then pick an answer choice without really severely testing each and every one. So approach two can hardly be called a separate approach because there, like I said, there are situations where you have to do it, but when you have to do it, it's not a choice. It's just something you have to fall back on if the LSAC is mean and decides not to reward you with approach one outcomes. So again, I really feel like having this conversation is limited utility, but just because I am so generally minimal and I normally don't even talk about make this explicit. But for the purpose of instruction, I'm just going to see if this kind of stuff helps you, if that's what you're looking for. And we've reached the end. As always, thanks for being here. Do the things that help the algorithm, help the channel. Growth is always good. So yeah. But more importantly, as always, email me if you have any further questions. Comments. The YouTube creator studio thing is kind of flaky when it comes to giving me personal alerts. I think for a lot of other people it's fine, but for me, for a reason, it doesn't tell me unless I actually go in and look for comments. It takes me a while sometimes to notice them. But if you want my attention on a particular issue, if you have any feedback at all, email is usually the best way to go. And of course, any tutoring inquiries should always be directed to that as well. And if you need practice material, my suggestion still remains consistent. Go with LawHub and maybe 7Sage on top of it, but LawHub is really the thing that everybody needs. I have no affiliation with either one. It's just that this is what works. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.